Thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. My name is Matt Lopez, Regional Sales Director for Levo Medical, and I welcome you to our webinar today, Finding Tinnitus Relief with the Levo System. Let me share my screen here, as I forgot that. Over the next 30 minutes, our clinical director, Dr. Daniel Drexler, will conduct a conversation with two patients to share some insights on their tinnitus journey, the impact of tinnitus has had on their quality of life, how they started with the Levo system, their overall experience with the therapy, as well as how they specifically define success. We'll leave some time at the end for some Q&A as well, so feel free to submit any questions in the Q&A form, and we'll address as many as we can at the end. Our two panelists today, pleased to welcome Nicholas Stein and Marc Goldfarb. Nick joins us today from Santa Barbara, California, currently an instructor in mindfulness meditation. His tinnitus symptoms started well over 18 years ago. Marc lives in the Dallas, Texas area, where he's a retired business owner. His symptoms started roughly 2 years ago. Both Nick and Marc have two unique tinnitus stories. Definitely very eager for having them share their perspective and how Levo has helped manage their symptoms over time. Our moderator today is Dr. Daniel Drexler, Clinical Director of Levo Medical. Dr. Drexler joins us today from Montevideo, Uruguay, where he's currently a clinical director and founder of a multidisciplinary tinnitus clinic. He's had many years of experience in the field of audiology and clinical research, published in various peer-reviewed journals. Thank you for joining us all today, the three of you. I'd like to pass it over to Dr. Drexler now, along with Nick and Marc, and please enjoy the conversation. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everybody. Nick, I want to start asking you about your tinnitus. The onset of tinnitus was 18 years ago. When did you realize that you needed help?
Well, I guess many tinnitus sufferers may also remember the first time they realized they had a problem. I certainly do. It was many years ago, and I was, for 40 years was a television producer, and I was working on a series for the History Channel. And as typically, I was working pretty late at night. It was about 9 o'clock at night, and I was in my office, and pretty much everyone has gone home. And I started hearing this terrible buzz, very high-pitched, tone, and I was sure it was the fluorescent lights. And so I just thought, we've got to get rid of these fluorescent lights, and I really should get a desk lamp and so forth and so on. And that's all I thought of it until I got in the car. And then I'm driving home, and I'm still hearing this, and I'm thinking, well, there are no fluorescent lights in my car. Clearly, this thing is following me. So that's when I thought, oh my gosh, this is not right. And, I can't remember exactly, it was such a long time ago, what I did about it. I guess I didn't do anything about it other than kind of freak out. And one of the thoughts that came to me, and I think it might come to Marc as well, which is like, it's quite depressing because you think to yourself, because that a little bit of research, you think, oh, there's no cure. So you find that out right away. And then you think, well, I may never have an actual silent moment again in my whole life, like to really understand and know silence. And it's true, because tinnitus is, until they can turn it off completely, that's the case. But anyway, that's what happened.
Daniel, you want me to answer?
Yes,
Yeah.
I just also want to know, Marc, when did your tinnitus started? I know that it started 2 years ago. When it started being a problem for you?
Well, it was approximately 2 years ago, and it really came out of nowhere. I know now it's because of an antidepressant that I was taking called mirtazapine, which that's a huge side effect. it took a while for me to put two and two together. I'd been tapering fairly slowly and took a couple of big drops, and that's really where it started. And to say it was distressing would be an understatement. It was really loud, and really was getting to me. I mean, I started thinking, how in the hell am I going to go on like this? Because, you know, like Nick, I thought, is this just what I'm going to hear the rest of my life? And is it going to, you know, make me crazy like this? I was having to take high doses of sleeping pills just to go to sleep. And if I woke up during the night, it was really a really rough time. So I immediately started doing research, and most of what I saw appeared to be snake oil. Luckily, I stumbled into a little article on the Levo system and found a local audiologist here that specializes in tinnitus and just happened to be, work with Levo. And yeah, so that's
and tell me, Mark.
Yeah.
At this moment, did you were used to hearing the tinnitus all day long? It was present during the whole day?
It was far worse. It seems to have a little bit of a pattern, or especially back then, seemed to be worse at night and really bad first thing in the morning. In the middle of the day, you know, it was there, and I was using all kinds of masking sounds. I was basically living in a bubble of masking sounds like crickets and cicadas, or there's a 10,000 megahertz that seemed to work with earphones all day long. It was really getting to me. And unfortunately, when I realized it was not curable, that just made my mental state even worse.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say was the worst moment in the day for you?
I would have to say just before going to bed and first thing in the morning.
Okay, because this is the moment where all the surrounding sound gets lower, so the tinnitus gets in the foreground, and you are not able to not stop thinking about him.
And I wasn't distracted by work. I found if I stayed busy, that helped. But you know, still, I had this sound following me wherever I went, and it was really, at that time, it was really making me crazy. Yeah, it was a bad few months until I started using the Levo system.
And Nick, what was the worst moment for you with the tinnitus?
Well, as I said, I think the very worst moment was just getting over the shock that I had this thing, and it wasn't going away. I mean, some people say, "Oh, I had it," and then you go, "Well, how did you get rid of it?" For the regular person who doesn't have it, you know, the example is always you go to a big rock concert, and you come out of the rock concert and your ears are ringing, right? But you know, when it doesn't stop, and when you can't make it stop, it's just bad. Now, in terms of just any other moment other than that terrible realization, I think, like Mark, you know, the quieter it is, the more to the front of your consciousness, you know, the ringing happens. So I too would use masking. It started out using fans, you know, in the room, which a lot of people use. I remember telling my wife that if we went to a party or we went to some event where there was a lot of noise with other people, that was great for me. I mean, background noise is fabulous. And yeah.
I would say that you feel that there is a strong correlation between the sound in the surrounding and the intensity of the tinnitus.
Yeah.
For example, if you are in a party.
Yeah. Well, also, I mean, he's right on in terms of being busy and on task. You know, I'm retired now, but when I was working, you know, if I was working and I'm dealing with people and I was in television production for 40 years. So, you know, when I'm locked into work, I don't think about it. It's like it's gone away. But as I move into my own office or do something else, then it comes back. So the distractions and the audio background really help.
I even played, if I was with other people and talking, but when I was in my office, alone, I had to turn on the masking sounds. A lot of people said, "What is that hissing? Is there?" It's drowns out my tinnitus a little bit. Mine was so loud at in the beginning that, or maybe it's my perception, I don't know, but I'd be outside with traffic, and for whatever reason, no matter how loud traffic was, it didn't drown out the sound. Waterfalls worked great. Creeks, waterfalls, that was wonderful because I could fountains.
Water. I mean, I still use masking. I don't have as much trouble going to sleep. I'm just one of these people can fall asleep. But I certainly in the morning I hear it. But the masking stuff, I really like rain, thunder, water, shore, so I'm a kind of a water guy. And the masking helps, but it's just what it sounds like. It's just simply masking.
Yeah.
Okay, so after the masking, you feel that tinnitus is exactly in the same place. You don't feel that you are creating a change in the way the tinnitus sounds or the intensity of the tinnitus through masking.
I think what it does is the masking gave me a little bit of a feeling of control. And so my anxiety level went down. And so the tinnitus didn't seem quite as loud, but it was by no means a fix. It was just barely coping initially. Now it's not a problem.
Okay. And Mark, how was your tinnitus therapy? How was your relation with Levo? How was starting to use Levo? When did you feel that you were seeing a change in the intensity of the tinnitus?
It was a strange. The way it worked was very strange. It was almost like suddenly one day I thought, gosh, it's not bothering me as bad. It kind of crept up on me. I was, the tinnitus wasn't bothering me anymore, and I didn't even realize it. It took probably about 2 to 3 weeks before I started to notice a little bit of an improvement. And I was like, wow, I could still hear it and it still bothered me, but it bothered me more like a mild headache would bother me, instead of just making me nuts. And then I guess after a couple of months, I don't know if this is how it's supposed to work, but it really didn't even seem as loud. It was almost like the volume actually did go down. And it was probably just, your anxiety gets ramped up and the tinnitus gets louder, and it's just a spiral. And now at this point, it's, more like a 3 or a 4, and it hardly bothers me at all. And I'll tell you, if you'd have asked me if that would be the case 2 years ago, I'd have said, oh, hell no. This is going to do me in, because it was really getting to me, having that loud sound following me around everywhere.
Mark, it's exactly the way you are saying, because many patients ask if we achieve a cure. And from our point of view, achieving a cure is getting to a situation in which the same situation that you are referring now. I mean, you still hear it, but you don't bother anymore about it because it's not so loud. Most of the day is below the surrounding sound. And when you hear it in the night, maybe it's not so detached from the sound that you have in the environment. So it doesn't matter you anymore.
Worst case, when I do have days where it's a little worse than others. And it's usually in the morning when I wake up, and all I do, I turn on the little masking sound. I don't even think twice about it. It's like taking an aspirin. It's really is amazing. And I got to be honest with you, I didn't think it'd work, but I was so desperate, I would have tried just about anything.
And Mark,
feeding back the sound that I'm hearing. I did.
Do you think that those changes you achieve through levotherapy are permanent changes? I mean, is it different from masking? Because in masking, you use the masking, and in the moment you hear the sound, the masking sound, you get relief. But when you turn off the masker, the tinnitus is there. Do you feel that this is not the case with the level therapy?
I'll tell you, it's interesting because I've started tapering mirtazapine again and started hearing, this is a couple months ago, and the sound started coming back a little louder. Well, it didn't distress me like it did the last time. Started using the Levo system, and it seemed to, the second time around, it seemed to help much faster. So there wasn't like a couple of months
Marc,
before.
It's really interesting what you're saying, because when we started developing the system, we had this big question: are we making changes that are permanent in time? Are we making changes that are mediated by neuroplasticity? And then we started using this system, developing this system 25 years ago. So we have now many patients that went through the therapy, and we started realizing exactly the same that you are saying now, that they had the tinnitus lowered in a permanent way, and then they could have some discompensations and the tinnitus will come up. But just using 1 or 2 or 3 days, the tinnitus was back in the place where the Levo therapy left it. So
that's exactly what happened.
You don't need.
Yeah.
And how was in your case, Nick?
I don't think I've been as lucky. I certainly found that when I was using it, the tinnitus would go, it would be lower, but it's that whole thing where it's either front of mind or back of mind. And if it's front of mind, it's annoying. Again, when I'm not on task or something, you know, when it suddenly has an opportunity to be there and I realize, oh my gosh, it's really loud today. But there are other times with using the Levo system where, you know, it goes sort of back of mind, and you know, when it's back of mind, it's gone in a sense. You just don't think about it. Now, obviously, I've been using the system a long time, and I kind of go on and off it. Sometimes I will literally use it for 6 weeks, and then I won't for a month, and then I'll go back for it for a while. I'm not getting super dramatic shifts in terms of like understanding that it happened, but it's just more of a mitigation. And I'm so used to this condition that, you know, sometimes I try to decide, well, you know, did the Levo really bring it down, or am I in a better mood? Are things going, you know? So it's not as dramatic as Marc's, where you can really kind of delineate it. Otherwise, I wouldn't still be using it. But when I do use it, I can definitely feel a drop. Yeah.
Do you feel then that knowing that you have the Levo system gives you a kind of, you know, psychological reinforcement, knowing that you have it there in case you need it? For example, you will have a period of time of 2 months or 3 months without needing to use it, but knowing that there's a partner for you there, that you can use it when your tinnitus gets worse.
Yeah,
is this the case?
Absolutely. I was actually going to say that when you are in the situation that Marc and I have been in, and there doesn't seem to be anything out there on the market that is going to be helpful or has any credibility, psychologically, knowing that you've got this therapy to apply really helps. And the psychology of this thing is important because the sound is phantom. There is no sound, actually. It is a completely subjective phenomenon. And so your subjectivity has to do with how you handle it, just in terms of the disease itself. If it's called a disease, I don't even know if it's called a disease. And how you react.
It's called symptom.
Symptoms, right?
It's called symptom.
Right. And I don't know the source completely of my, you know, what triggered it for me. I really don't. There's some theories that I've talked to some doctors about, but we can't really pin it down. But the psychological benefit of knowing I can go back to the system when I want to and lower it and mitigate it, and again put it more the back of my mind, and then next thing I know, I'm not having these moments where I'm going, oh, yeah, here's back. So yes, it's really, really important to know I've got a tool in my toolkit that I can go to. And
I'm going to agree with Nick. Just having the system, it's like, okay, if it gets bad, I've got this is huge, because I was really in a desperate state. Once I realized that there was no cure, got on all the Facebook groups and chat boards, and the desperation of everybody, I had to get off of it because it was horrible. They're all trying. So, until I found something that actually worked, mentally, this was one of the roughest battles I've ever had. And, what's funny is you try to tell that to somebody that doesn't suffer from tinnitus, and I call it tinnitus, tomato, tomato. They don't get it.
No.
They say, oh, just ignore it. Yeah. Good luck.
And do you feel, Mark, that having the sound designed in a precise way, in a calibrated way that sounded similar to your tinnitus, helped you explain to the others what do you feel? For example, at home, were you able to show it to the ones that live with you?
I did. I showed it to my wife just so she'd know what I heard all the time.
And what did she say?
I still don't think she gets it. I don't. It's hard for somebody to empathize. I did have a couple of people say, "Wow, that'd be terrible," but until and I probably would have been the same way. Say, I just ignore it. But it was easier said than done. I was not able to ignore it at all.
Well, I would just jump in here because I don't know if the audience completely knows what we're listening to when we go to sleep. Briefly, you go to an audiologist and you describe the sound and you put in the earbuds and they recreate the sound on a machine. So they, until you say, no, that's it. No, that's not it. Lower, higher, whether it's monotone or whether it's a little raggedy. So you really work very hard to match the subjective sound you hear. Again, you're not matching a real sound, but they're trying to make a perfect clone. And it sometimes takes 2 or 3 visits to the audiologist over time to make that perfect sound. And then doctor, tell me if I'm right about this. But so then you go to sleep with your tinnitus, then you take the clone of the sound of your tinnitus, you put it in and you sleep with it when your brain is very plastic and you're meaning that you're not resisting it at all because you're asleep. And that's habituation to that. Now, this is my unscientific thing, and I don't even think this is probably right. You tell me, but it's almost like you're doubling up on the tinnitus at night, and then during the day, your tinnitus feels less than what it felt at night. As a result of feeling less, it starts to dissipate and mitigate and not disappear, but bother you less. Is that kind of the layman's explanation for it?
Yes, Nick, it's a very good explanation, because usually what happens here is that there is a mistake in the way our brain processes the incoming information. It is very similar to what happens in the phantom symptom, the phantom sensation when someone loses a hand, and after 1 or 3 months he has pain in the fingers of a hand that it doesn't exist anymore. So here we have the possibility of giving back this hand to the brain. I mean, giving back the sound where you have a problem inside your hearing system. We can design the precise sound and give it back to the brain and tell him, look, the sound is here. You don't need to look for it, because when the brain starts looking for the missing information, the neurons that process this information start being more excitable and they start firing without sound outside. I mean, they start firing spontaneously. Mm-hmm. So when you give back the precise information that is missing, you can give a very precise clue to the brain on how to regain the balance between excitation and inhibition in all those neurons that are involved. So what we do here is to, in a certain way, is to reprogram the brain and tell him, look, you are making a mistake here. You are making a mistake. We can give you the information in order to correct this mistake that you are making. And for us, I repeat, when we started creating the system 25 years ago, it was a very big question for us if we were making permanent changes in the brain. Because if we are making permanent changes, after we stop the therapy, those changes remain though. So it was a very, very exciting news for us after 2 or 3 years that we started meeting patients like you, Mark, and like you, Nick, to hear the stories they were telling us. No, they were exactly the same stories. You know, for example, in the case of Merck, there are sharp situations. I have tinnitus. I use the system 2, 3, 4 days, and I get better. In the case of Nick, it's a different situation. But anyway, he feels that getting the system puts the tinnitus in the background, and he can go through, and he has a kind of sense that he has control of the tinnitus, because one of the worst things for someone that suffers tinnitus is to feel that he lost control.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's where I was for several months or a few months before I stumbled onto the Levo. I tell you, it was the FDA clearance that I said, oh, there's actually something that has some kind of government, approval, if you will. I tried supplements and some of the other harebrained ideas. Nothing worked. I was going to say too that for me, when I realized that they were feeding back basically the sound that I was hearing while I was sleeping, I was really kind of skeptical. But at that point, I would have tried anything. It's like, really, the thing that's torturing me is going to help me. It's like, yeah, I never would.
Yeah, right. There's this sort of
this is really funny.
Counterintuitive aspect to it, because, like you say, it's sort of like, am I really going to add this? And I would tell you this: if it's called habituation therapy, my audiologist and I talked about this quite a lot. You have to habituate yourself to using this device in bed. It's on an iPod, which is only about this big. It's not Bluetooth. I don't know if that's coming one day. That'd be great. But it's a wire.
It's gonna come.
That would be great.
That would be great.
It's gonna come.
Because sleeping with a wire, I mean, Mark, have you woken up with it around your neck or under your back? I've gotten very used to it, and just But my audiologist told me that people couldn't habituate to the process, to the machinations of actually doing this, and that's still a challenge, not for me, but for a lot of people I know.
It's interesting. My audiologist apparently had sold 6 of them, or had 6 patients with him, and I said, I was really skeptical, to be honest, but she said 5 out of 6 love it, and 1 didn't. I thought, okay, I'm sold. It's that's good. That's good. Since I was batting 0 with everything else I tried,
I wanted to know, because also for me, when this idea came up in 1998, I was wondering if hearing the same sound from outside would be a relief or it won't be a relief. So I wanted both of you to tell me how was starting hearing the sound from outside, and when did you start feeling that it was a relief?
Well, when I first started using it, I still had quite a bit of anxiety just from the tinnitus itself, and it really didn't bother me. And in some ways, it kind of felt good to hear the sound, outside my own head. So I'm going to say, if anything, it was a little bit on the calming, as much as that was possible back then. Never bothered me. My therapist, my audiologist said, that 5 out of 6 people had the same, more or less the same reaction. Only one person didn't like the sound. And, you know, it did take, I will say this, it took 3 tries to get the sound just right, because at first it seemed like my tinnitus was jumping all over the place a little bit. It wasn't, it hadn't really, I don't know, stabilized. And so we had to work with it a little bit to get just the right sound.
Yeah. Now, it's true that it's so counterintuitive to imagine taking your internal sound, externalizing it, putting it back in. But once you have had some good results, like I say, there's a sense of therapy. You know, you realize there's something to this, and that you get a sense from reading the literature and the website and everything else and the FDA thing, is that, you know, some very serious people have been working very hard to try to find something that could help. And it seems sort of exotic sometimes, you know, you're sleeping with earbuds in. It seems exotic that you're matching when you go to the audiologist. It's quite an interesting experience to sit there, try to find your phantom sound and clone it, you know. So, but altogether you think, all right, you know, I'll do this because nobody else is helping me. And like Mark said, you really need the help.
Oh, yeah.
And I was going to tell you one more thing.
You know,
so with that, because you clone the sound, the only person, of course, maybe one friend, but I let my wife listen to it, you know, because for empathy, like, this is what I hear all day. How do you like that? And it's like, if another person hears it, and her thing was, oh my God, that is horrible. And I'm glad to hell I don't have it, because I'm not sure how I would deal with it. So in a funny way, it's sympathy, it's empathy. So it's rare you can do that. Like, if you have a broken arm, you can't tell somebody what it feels like. It's one of the few things you can put them in their ears and go, welcome to my world, you know?
Yeah. You know, for us, we believe that the way of inducing the changes we need is more effective when you use exactly the same sound. But at the beginning, I have many questions about that, because exactly what you were saying, you thought that hearing the same sound that you are hearing is going to be horrible. Yeah. But, you know, now we have more than 700 patients treated here in Uruguay, Montevideo, with the system. And after one or 2 or 3 weeks, they all told the same thing that you were saying. I started hearing it from outside, and I got relief, and I wasn't bothered by the fact that it was the same sound. And I had a way of creating empathy with my surrounding people, showing them what I hear. And I started to feel there are many patients that refer that they started feeling that they have control over the tinnitus. Since they adjusted the volume of the sound to the tinnitus every night, they started understanding the tinnitus, where the tinnitus is every night and how it's evolving during the therapy. So there are many things that I think that are very important in the fact that we are creating a very precise sound that is exactly the same one to the tinnitus, because it gives the patients a lot of tools, and also the audiologists. The audiologists have a graph of evolution of intensity of every day, how the tinnitus was every day of the week, you know, and knowing how to take decisions based on this information. Right. So also the other fact, the other fact that was important for us is creating the therapy during the night. Right. And why during the night? Because the auditory system doesn't stop firing during the night. That doesn't stop processing information. It processes information in all the levels of the auditory system. And we have a window of opportunity for stimulation of 8 hours. Right. So you won't be able to do this kind of stimulation, because neuroplastic changes need that the information that you are giving be constant and during a long period of time. And you will not able to have this window of opportunity of 8 hours if the therapy is interacting with your daily activities. Right. So having this possibility of doing this during the night is very important, because you are not aware of the stimulation during the night, and you have a very long period of stimulation. Yeah.
I'm going to jump in here, guys. Thank you very much for this conversation. Due to time, I'm going to respect the 30 minutes and call it here, but we'll leave some time for Q&A as well. Before I do that, just a quick couple of updates from our side here at Levo Medical. We will be attending a couple of conferences here coming up in the second half of the year, one in the University of Iowa, as well as in November, the ADA's annual conference held in Bonita Springs, Florida. So if you do plan on attending either of these conferences, please stop by, say hello to us at the booth. And also something exciting, we are rolling out next month at Levo Medical, something new. When it comes to tinnitus, we know that there's many factors that can contribute to the severity of symptoms, just like what Mark and Nick had contributed here today in our conversation. So we will be introducing a new therapeutic learning platform specifically designed to help guide and provide support throughout your therapy journey. What it does is provide both information and practical tools with two goals in mind: decreasing that intensity reduction, as well as building skills that allow you to desensitize that perception, which all reduces that negative impact on your that tinnitus has on your quality of life. It's an online platform consisting of various self-paced learning modules, providing information on the Levo system, also techniques, strategies on attention training, stress management, identifying habits in your daily changes to help with that tinnitus discomfort. So all of this will be coming very soon, and that synergistic work along with the Levo system, something to add as a value to both patients and providers during their therapy journey. So again, before I open it up to Q&A, thank you very much to the panelists for today's discussion. It's a great conversation and very appreciate all three of your time. If you are interested in finding out if Levo is right for you, how to get in touch with a local audiologist to schedule an appointment, or if you have any other specific questions that you want to just give us a call or email, you can also utilize the QR code to schedule a 10-minute call to speak with us on specific questions in more detail. With that being said, I'm going to open it up to Q&A. So if you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. I'll start with one. This is a question for both Nick and Mark. After using the Levo system for a few months, did you find the color of your tinnitus change, the type of your tinnitus, did it change, or was it the same, just at a lower volume?
I'm going to say it. I was just going to say, I'm going to say that it did actually change the tinnitus sound a little bit. It seemed to, make it a little more focused. It's kind of hard to explain exactly. It seemed like before it had a little bit of a low pitch thrown in there. I'm going to say it turned it into kind of a single, more manageable sound. Kind of hard to put it into words.
Nick, anything to add?
Well, no, mine has been the model of consistency. There's very few things that are dependable in life, but sound of my tinnitus is one of them, and so no. I mean, for me, it's just lower. Like the doctor said, every evening. I mean, you get the tone with the audiologist, but every evening before you go to bed, you set the volume and you listen very carefully, and you can tell when when it goes higher, because the sound is louder in your mind, and then it goes lower. So you have control over that, because you want to try to match it both in terms of the frequency, but also in terms of the amplitude, which is the sound. And so it really is an amazing feedback loop. And then when you go to the audiologist, she has all that data, and that's how you start to. It's a management thing. It's management is the word. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much. You guys have touched on this during the conversation about the number of times it takes to actually replicate that sound. You mentioned 1 or 2 times before going in and following up.
3.
3 times for you. Can you kind of go into more detail about that? What was the process like? Is it more of trial and error? And just talk about that in a little bit. I'll go ahead and start with you, Nick.
Yeah, I would check back in with my audiologist in Los Angeles about every 6 months for a while, just kind of tweak it, and or I could start to tell that it didn't match, and again, was my tinnitus, moving around? Perhaps it was, even though I've said it's consistent because essentially it sounds the same. But suddenly the match between the sound and it had shifted a little bit. So I'd go back and we'd tweak it up. But it's a very strange process trying to clone this phantom sound in your head. It's just an odd thing to do. And it does take a number of tries. And then when you leave, you think, okay, we got it. We really got it this time. And then you find it really does help you. And again, there's a psychological component. Once that you've matched those sounds and cloned them perfectly, you're like, my therapy is working. I'm in good hands, therapeutically. And so, yeah, I kind of check in with her every number of, maybe twice a year.
Excellent.
Yeah, in my case, I think I was so anxious about the tinnitus at the time that I was, that was making the sound much worse and probably adding to it a little bit. So we tried a couple of times, matched it, and then she had me come back. I think it was about a month later, and the sound actually, that is kind of when the sound started clearing up and becoming more focused. Not in a bad way, by the way, and in a good way. And we had one more tweak from what I remember. And I haven't had to adjust it since. I'm going to see her just by coincidence this Friday. I haven't seen her in 6-8 months. It's kind of stupid proof, really, once you get the hang of it. It's just sleeping with earbuds for a few months initially took a little bit of getting used to.
Yeah,
it's habituating yourself to habituation therapy.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Thank you. Question for you, Daniel, Dr. Drexler. You mentioned tinnitus as a symptom. Can you elaborate a bit on that? Symptom of what? I know there's many different factors that play into tinnitus, but if you can just touch on that for a bit.
Well, the first thing is that tinnitus is not an illness, it's a symptom. It can be a symptom of different problems in the body. I may say that 3 to 4% of the cases is secondary to an organic situation, an organic illness. For example, it can be secondary to acoustic neurinoma, to a tumor. It can be secondary to a neuropathy. It can be secondary to a metabolic issue, for example, with glucose or diabetes, or it can be also secondary, for example, to blood pressure. But in most of the cases, in 90%, 95% or above 95%, it doesn't have any illness behind. It's just a problem in the way we process information inside our brain. And those are the tinnitus that are called subjective idiopathic tinnitus and are the ones that we treat with Levo. So if we know that around 15% or 70% of the population of the world has tinnitus, we are talking of maybe 1 billion persons suffering from tinnitus in the world. And inside this whole group of 1 billion persons, maybe 900 million or above 900 million have a tinnitus that is idiopathic, that is a tinnitus that is not related to any kind of illness. It's just wrong process. It's a mistake that our brain makes when it processes sound.
Perfect. Thank you. Question about sleeping and insomnia with the Levo system. Can you go quickly into detail how Levo may benefit patients who do suffer from insomnia?
Yes, of course, because there is a close relation between tinnitus and sleep. When tinnitus gets worse, sleep gets worse, and in return, also tinnitus gets worse. So it's a kind of vicious cycle that takes you down. When you improve tinnitus, you also improve quality of sleep because the patient is not so, the anxiety of going to sleep with the tinnitus is reduced. The patients get a better quality of sleep, and then you have a virtuous cycle because the better the tinnitus gets, the better sleep gets, and the better sleep gets, the better tinnitus gets. So there's a close correlation. And one thing that we realized that when we started developing Levo was that for many patients, the worst moment of the day was before going to sleep, and also the quality of sleep with tinnitus was really affected. So we developed this treatment also thinking in that, giving a tool for the patient in order to be able to improve the quality of sleep and then create this virtuous cycle in order to improve also tinnitus.
Excellent. Thank
Daniel,
you.
I was just going to say, I don't think I would have been able to sleep at all if it wasn't for taking Ambien and sleeping pills.
Yeah,
I would really been in trouble.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. This is a very, very common situation. What we realized in the trials we made and in the scientific publications we made is that there is a very sharp improvement in the TFI subscale for sleep. In the test that we performed to evaluate tinnitus, there's a subscale for sleep, and it was a very good news for us to understand that there is a strong improvement in the quality of sleep.
can you explain the DFI survey and how that works? That's another subjective feedback loop, right?
Well, what it usually used for research and also for monitoring the processes in tinnitus is the psychological test. There are many of them. One of them is called THI, that is Tinnitus Handicap Inventory. And there's another one that was developed in Portland, in the VA hospital in Portland, that is called TFI, that is becoming more and more the standard in the field. The TFI is a questionnaire that makes you many questions about your tinnitus. How do you feel about the tinnitus? Do you have problem to sleep? Do you feel that you can find a solution, or do you feel that there's no solution? And each one of those questions has a score, and after that you create a score for the whole test. And it's a very important tool that we use because, as you said many times while we were talking, it's a phantom sound. So it's very difficult for us as physicians to understand how things are happening inside the brain of the patient. So one of the biggest tools that we have are those kind of tests. We make those questions and we have a score, and we understand how the score evolves during therapy. The second very, very useful instrument that we have, the second tool that we have, is the one that we developed with Levo. We can measure tinnitus. Since we achieve a sound that is very similar to the tinnitus, we can also have a very consistent measurement of intensity of tinnitus across the therapy. So what we do with Levo is we integrate information that comes out from the psychological test with information of the evolution of intensity. And this is a very powerful tool because for me, when I started working with tinnitus, I felt that I was getting inside a cave with no possibility of seeing anything. And then I had a light in my hand, and I started understanding what is going on inside the patient brain. So mixing this information from the psychological test and the graph of evolution of tinnitus is a very powerful tool for us.
Daniel, I was just going to say, yeah, my audiologist actually did do a test on me when I first got there, and then a few months later, and it was dramatic improvement. She wasn't telling me anything I didn't already know. I think she just wanted to have it on record and get it quantified for her own use.
Right, but
yes, we usually perform the test at the beginning of the therapy, 1.5 months later. Then 3 months later, and at the end of therapy. And then we notice how is the evolution along the treatment. So mixing these scores with the graph of evolution of intensity is an incredibly powerful tool for us.
I have a question while we're at it. In terms of the matching when you go to sleep, one doctor said you definitely don't want to, well, psychologically you think more is more, meaning like, if this is good for me, I'll turn it up, a notch or two, because that's really, and then she said, no, that's not right. Obviously you want to match it, but she said, if you go anywhere, go a little below the sound. Do you think that's right? Or you just got to try to make it perfect?
Well, Nick, I'm glad that you brought this issue in, because, we had a military man that came to our clinic. He was from the artillery. I don't know if you say artillery in English. The bombs. And he was used to hear loud things. And he came to our office 1 week after he started the treatment, and he told me, I put it really hard because I want it really loud, because I want to have a very fast result here. So I put it really loud. And no, this is a mistake. Yeah. If you put it loud, if you detach the sound of Levo from the tinnitus, the results are not so good. The better results are achieved when the sound of Levo is just above the sound of your tinnitus. Right. Not equal, not below, not very detached, louder. It's just above. If you give those precise, this is why we insist a lot in the importance of being precise in the synthesis of the sound, but also in the calibration of intensity. That is why Levo is a system that is precisely calibrated from the iPad, from the iPod, and the earbuds. All the system is calibrated in a very precise way.
Thank you, guys. Couple questions have come up about pricing. I'll speak to that. Each of our individual Levo providers do price Levo independently. So depending on various factors, additional service provided or anything of that nature. So happy to have a one-off conversations if you want to be more specific for your general area. Again, contact us directly or utilize the QR code above to schedule a quick call with me.
I was going to say, and my price actually included, it is high, but it included several follow-up visits with the audiologist.
Exactly. Yeah. So independent for each location.
It's really important. Excuse me. Let me jump in, Matt. It's really important to understand that you are not buying a device. You are buying a therapy. It's a therapy that is based on a device. But this is why also we developed this new platform that Matt was telling before, because it's important to understand that you are entering a process of therapy. And in many cases, you are going to be related to the therapy for a long time, as is in the case of Nick and Mark here. No, it's a therapy. It's not a device.
Thank you. Couple more questions before we sign off here. Tinnitus after COVID. Daniel, briefly in 10 seconds or so, can you share your experience with patients that have had COVID and developed onset of tinnitus?
Well, in our clinic, we went crazy during COVID. There were so many people calling that they felt that tinnitus started after COVID or during COVID, or many of them related that they had a very mild tinnitus, but during COVID, it got louder. And so they were coming to our office to understand what was happening. We really noticed an increase of people with tinnitus during COVID. Also, we noticed that after 6 or 7 months of COVID, things used to get back to the previous stage. So it also happened with the symptoms that you had with COVID, you know, the breathing and everything. It took a very long time to get back to the previous situation.
Excellent. Well, with that, gentlemen, again, I want to thank all three of you for joining us today. Really appreciate the time, and I feel a lot of valuable information was present here today. So again, thank you. I will sign off. Again, if any questions, please reach out to us, and we are happy to help and be here to assist in any way. With that, have a good afternoon, and see you again. Take care.
Thank you.